Brian Carn's interview over at the Willie Moore Jr. podcast exposes Brian Carn's issues even more. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a lot to talk about as it relates to the Willie Moore Jr. Interview with Brian Carn, as well as why Brian Carn just keeps being exposed by his own words. And not only his own words, but also all of the individuals who keep coming forward to speak about issues and things that have transpired between them and Brian Carn. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a prime example of one of the reasons why the church is lacking in power, authenticity, and this is another reason why so many people just don't want to deal with the institution. But I want to talk about it, and you most certainly don't want to miss this video. Now, over on the Willie Moore Jr. podcast, Brian Carn, the self-proclaimed wonder kid prophet, was interviewed by Willie Moore. I want to first of all tell you guys that I'm not really shocked by the type of interview that this was, because typically when I go over to see Willie Moore Jr. or see any of those clips or anything, they're typically softball interviews. They're not really interviews that are going to really be conducive to furthering a conversation or enlarging a perspective as it relates to the institution. And so in this particular video, what I want to talk about is Brian Carn's interview, but also how he keeps exposing himself and his lack of authenticity when it comes to actually telling the truth about who he is as an individual and what people are experiencing because of him and some of the things that he has done and said. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you won't believe this, but in this video, he actually referred to people who speak about him as dogs, and that he says that he actually is the moon. Now, I'm going to be showing you a clip here in just a minute, but I definitely want you to pay attention to this interview, because I'm always trying to spark a larger conversation, and I'm always trying to get us to think higher and elevate our perspective. One of the issues that I have with Brian Carn is that Brian Carn preaches one thing and completely lives something else. You know, that's what the Bible talks about as being hypocrisy. His hypocritical nature is the very thing that baffles me sometimes. And he says in this particular interview, and I'm going to let you hear, and I'm going to give some commentary to it. He says that he thinks he heard Bishop T.D. Jakes say this particular quote, that, dogs bark at the moon, and he feels like he's the moon. And when dogs bark at the moon, nobody writes a headline. But if the moon, speaks back, then there's going to be an issue. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you guys to pay very close attention to this interview. Pay very close attention to this. And I'm going to give you guys my full commentary on this, because this is something that we most certainly need to talk about.
You know, when I look, because I consider you a brother and a friend. Like, I don't get an opportunity to see all the ups and downs and ebbs and flows. Of course, from a distance, I pray.
Yeah. Now, I want you to understand something. He starts off the interview by simply saying, I consider you a friend. A lot of times when you put friends in a situation where you're interviewing them, it doesn't necessarily create an environment where it's going to be really conducive to you really extrapolating from this individual the real truth and really expanding the conversation. I think one of the greatest interview traits of a real good interviewer is to be able to press the interviewee in a way that you can really squeeze out of them some things that they may have not said or we may not have heard on other platforms, because every single thing that you hear from Brian Carn and in this particular interview, to me, is just repetitive talking points. Let me also say this. We're going to stop and start this video for copyright reasons. According to the U.S. Copyright Act, we have a right to give commentary to it. So I'm going to be, staying within those guidelines. But we definitely want to make sure that we are paying attention to this interview. He says, he doesn't pay attention to the ebbs and flows, whatever that means. I don't know if that means he doesn't pay attention to the headlines that are constantly dropping on this fella. But this is the commentary that we're getting from the two of these guys.
But when you wake up in the morning and maybe you see something that somebody said negatively,
Okay.
how do you keep a level head without wanting to attack? I know your daddy now, so I know it's in you.
Yeah.
So when you have different, I seen one with a woman pastor who I think's amazing. Shout out to Tiff. I love her to life. I seen something there. And then, you wake up one day and some woman accuses you of, hey, I was talking to him and he did that. Like, how do you keep a level head when?
Now that's our first problem. He says, oh, you wake up one morning and you see some woman saying something like, I was talking to him. Talking to him is not absolutely what has been happening, Willie Moore. They have not been talking. It's not like they've been walking and chewing bubble gum. And see, this is the disingenuousness when it comes to these types of interviews that I find so, ridiculous. If you're going to have an interview, to have a real interview and say what it is. These women aren't saying that, that they were talking to him. No, according to Vashti, Ennis, and some of these other women, these women are accusing Brian Carn of being in sexual relationships with them. Clearly, that is what is being said. That is clearly what's being communicated. That is clearly what these folks are saying. And that's what you need to be, of course, giving some type of commentary to. And I think that in my humble opinion, I think it's just really dangerous when you're not honest about that and you don't take on the real implications of what's actually being said here. And that's dangerous, in my opinion. That's just perfectly dangerous.
People were putting holes in your armor.
Yeah.
Because that is embarrassing.
Yeah.
That's a little difficult.
Yeah.
Do you start to shield yourself away from people? Because you said that your mentor as a prophet was like, you got to be to yourself.
Yeah.
It's almost if you can't have humanity if you.
Now that's the other thing that drives me crazy. It's not that we can't say that we can't have humanity or that we don't have humanity as a Christian. The expectation is for our leaders to live a standard that they preach and they sing about. It is not that they can't have humanity, because we know that these people are human. But here's the dichotomy of this. On the one hand, preachers are always asking for us to look at them as if they have some sort of special endowment or power from God that the rest of us do not have. And then when they get found into being certain circumstances and certain situations, then all of a sudden they want us to remember their humanity. And so this is the hypocritical thing about this, because normally when the people in the church have human moments and they exhibit humanity situations, they are ostracized, they are demonized, they are told that, God doesn't love them, God isn't with them. I mean, over the last couple of weeks, we've seen so many different things when it comes to the internet and things like this. So just understand something. It's not that the pastor doesn't have humanity. It's not that the prophet doesn't have humanity. It would be simply the prophet is preaching and teaching something that goes contrary to what he is actually living, doing, and saying. Okay? So it's not this humanity. And see, it's this kind of rhetoric. It is this kind of softball speeching that just annoys me. We understand that these ninjas are human. We get that. We understand it completely. We get it totally. We got it. But here's our problem with this. Our problem with this is he's running around here trying to preach and talk to folks crazy about living holy and living right, all while, according to Vashti, Ennis, and some of these other folks, he's not living up to that standard. And that is the issue.
Christianity.
Yeah.
How does Brian Carn handle that public scrutiny?
That's a great question. Again, I fell in love with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the thing. He always starts with this. And you notice when he's sitting here talking, I love this voice he always uses. Everybody always, oh, I just fell in love with Jesus. I fell in love with Jesus. Okay.
And I go to the secret place and I spend time with him. It has its challenges, but for me, it's the cost of being public. Mm-hmm. People are going to talk. People have their opinions.
It's not a matter of people talking or people having their opinions, Brian. Here's what it is. People are reflecting to you what you and showing you. And what you have a problem with is the fact that we keep calling you on the carpet on your drama. I just want everybody to remember this is the same man that followed a witch, that repeated a witch's prophecy word for word. I know and this is why I tell you guys a person's history matters. I don't know what you're thinking, bro. I don't know if you think you're just going to reinvent yourself like the rest of us don't know who you are, but this is a whole mess for me.
By nature, I'm a person who likes to reach out to the individual who says something about me. Like I'll call somebody who's saying something about me who nobody would even know that they said something. And I say, why are you doing that? Why are you saying that about me? That's my nature. But I also have to know that sometimes is rooted in the need to, for everybody to like you. Rooted in a need for everybody to have great things to say about you. That can come from a lack of.
Well, first of all, sir, that's just human nature. All of us want to be liked and loved. So, I understand that you want to add all of these, psychological points to it, but I don't necessarily agree that that's the totality of the situation, in my humble opinion.
Information in one place, you need to be validated. So you need everybody's approval. When you know who you are and you know what God has called you to do, and you're sure about what God has called you to do, it really doesn't matter. You just move past that.
If it doesn't matter, you wouldn't be talking about it. If it didn't matter, you wouldn't always be coming out here crying and trying to worship and sing songs after you get caught in all of your foolishness.
Stuff. So I learned at a young age. I think I heard Bishop Jake say one time that dogs bark at the moon all the time, and there's never a press release on dogs barking at the moon.
Yeah.
Because that's what dogs do. But if that moon ever barks back at that dog, there'll be a press conference. Yeah. So I understand I'm the moon, they're the dog, and I don't bark.
Sir, no, sir, that's not the case. And you're deceived. And because you're deceived, I want to talk to you a little bit about the moon. The moon in some instances is considered emotionally distant. And I think that's one of the reasons why these are characteristics of the moon. I'm going to talk to you a little bit, sir, since you say you the moon, I'm going to talk to you about some characteristics of the moon right now. Emotionally distant. It is detached. The moon is detached. I think you are detached, Brian Carn, from the reality of the situations that you cause in other people's lives. It seems to me that you are somewhat crazy in your mind, that you think that you are, some kind of way, emotionally connected to these people. I think some women and some people who have encountered you would have a difference of opinion as relates to that. Now, you may not agree with that, but I think if we ever would ask Bishop Demetrius Senegal and his situation with you, I bet you anything he would say that you are somewhat emotionally distant or detached from the reality of the emotional damage that you cause to other people. Let me also say that the moon is reflective. It is not original. Let me just say this. The moon only reflects light. See, here's the thing that I've had to learn about you, Brian. You don't really have the light. You just go and try and steal the light of others in order for you to appear that you are, you have the light. Think about it. You actually followed a witch word for word. You didn't have a word. You went and stole a word, right? That means you're reflective. You're not original. You're not coming with an original word, okay? And then most of the time when you give prophecies, they are so ambiguous. I mean, who's going to follow this stuff? I mean, your prophets, this is unnerving. You're also very inconsistent in your statements, sir. We've seen you in other places, and sometimes these inconsistencies can show up as mood swings and the crazy behavior that you exhibit. Also, there is a hidden side to you, and boy, oh boy, do we keep seeing that, because the moon can be hidden. Trust me. Just like the dark side of the moon, you're going to keep secrets. You're going to hide parts of themselves and parts of yourself that is not good. You're going to appear to be strong, gentle, but you try to influence people very strongly. Okay. The moon controls tides subtly. But that you also will try and manipulate situations quietly behind the scenes. That's typically one of those characteristics, right? But it's also only visible in darkness, right? You might show your true nature and who you are in those dark places and spaces, okay? So when it comes to you, Brian Carn, I'm just not really sure with this Willie Moore Jr. interview, whether or not you are whether or not you are really telling the truth, exhibiting the truth in this interview. And I think when you compare yourself to the moon, I think you might be right. But here's my problem. I've never seen dogs barking at the moon. Now, I've seen wolves howling at the moon, but I've never seen dogs barking at the moon. You guys make sure that y'all leave me a comment down below and tell me whether or not you've seen dogs barking at the moon. And if you've seen dogs barking at the moon on a consistent basis, I'm going to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, you probably need to run for your life.